You hatch underground in complete darkness, your tiny body pushing through the soft membrane of your egg. The soil around you is damp and cool, pressing in from all sides like a living tomb. You're not alone. Dozens of your siblings are doing the same thing, breaking free from their eggs in this cramped burrow deep beneath the forest floor. Some make it out faster than you, their small forms already wriggling through the dirt. Others struggle, their movements weaker, slower. You don't wait for them. You can't afford to. Your mother isn't here. She disappeared weeks ago, back to the surface world you've never seen. She dug this burrow, laid her eggs, and vanished. That's how it works for your species. No parental care, no guidance, no protection. You're an Indian purple frog, and from the moment you hatch, you're completely on your own. The dirt around you is thick and heavy, but it's all you know. You push forward, your stubby legs working against the soil, following an instinct you don't understand but can't ignore. You're not built like other frogs. Your body is bloated and round, almost balloon-like, with a pointed snout that looks more like a pig's nose than anything amphibian. Your legs are short and stubby, designed for digging rather than jumping. You look weird, even by frog standards, but down here in the underground darkness, looks don't matter, function does, and you're perfectly built for this buried world. The soil tastes of earthworms and decomposing leaves. You don't know it yet, but this underground realm will be your home for most of your life. While other frogs live in ponds and trees, you'll spend your days tunneling through dirt, hunting in complete darkness, never seeing sunlight except for a few crucial weeks each year. It's a strange existence, but it's yours. Your first meal comes within hours of hatching. A termite larva, soft and white, squirms through the soil near your head. You don't hesitate. Your tongue shoots out, faster than your brain can process, and the larva disappears into your mouth. It's warm and fatty, giving you the energy you need to keep digging. Around you, your siblings are doing the same, each one focused on finding their next meal. There's no sharing, no cooperation. It's every frog for themselves down here. The tunnels your mother dug are narrow and winding, creating a maze of passages through the dark earth. You follow these paths, your sensitive snout detecting vibrations and chemical traces in the soil. Every movement, every tiny creature burrowing nearby, sends signals through the ground that you're learning to read. A beetle grub shifts position 3 inches to your left. An ant colony bustles somewhere above your head. The earth is alive with hidden activity, and you're becoming part of it. Days pass in this underground world. You grow stronger, your digging becoming more efficient. Your stubby legs, which seemed so useless at first, prove perfect for pushing through packed soil. Your pointed snout works like a living shovel, breaking through harder patches of earth. You're not fast, but you're persistent. You keep digging, keep hunting, keep surviving in this buried realm that most creatures never experience. The soil changes as you dig deeper. Sometimes it's loose and sandy, easy to move through. Other times it becomes clay-like, forcing you to work harder for every inch of progress. You encounter roots, some thin as hair, others thick as your body. You navigate around them or burrow beneath them, always moving, always searching for food. The darkness is absolute, but you don't need light. Your other senses have sharpened to compensate. Your hunting technique develops through trial and error. Earthworms are your preferred prey, long, soft, and packed with nutrients. But catching them requires patience. You position yourself in their path, feeling for the subtle vibrations they create as they move through the soil. When one gets close enough, You strike with precision, your tongue extending to capture your target before it can escape. Sometimes you miss, and the worm retreats deeper into the earth. Sometimes you succeed, and the rich protein fuels your continued growth. Beetle larvae are another favorite. They're slower than earthworms, but harder to digest. Their tough exoskeletons require more chewing, more effort to break down, but they're worth it. Each larva provides enough energy to keep you digging for hours. You learn to recognize their movement patterns, the way they push through soil in search of decaying organic matter. When you find one, you approach carefully, using your body weight to pin it down before delivering the killing bite. Ants present a different challenge. They're small individually, but they travel in groups. When you encounter an ant trail, you have to be strategic, too aggressive, and they'll swarm you with their chemical defenses. Too passive, and they'll simply march past, leaving you hungry. You learn to pick off stragglers, the ones that wander away from the main column. Quick strikes, fast retreats, minimal risk. The soil ecosystem is more complex than you initially realized. Fungal networks spread through the earth like underground highways, connecting distant plants and carrying chemical messages. Bacterial communities break down dead matter, creating the rich organic compounds that feed the creatures you hunt. Root systems create tunnels and air pockets, making some areas easier to navigate than others. You're learning to read this hidden landscape, understanding which areas provide the best hunting opportunities. Your body continues to change as you grow. Your skin becomes thicker, better adapted to the constant abrasion of moving through dirt. Your muscles strengthen, particularly in your legs and shoulders, giving you more power for digging. Your snout becomes more sensitive, able to detect minute changes in soil composition and chemical signatures. You're becoming a more efficient but underground predator with each passing day. But efficiency comes with costs. The constant digging wears on your body. Your stubby limbs ache from the repetitive motion. Small cuts and scrapes from sharp rocks and root fragments mark your skin. The underground world is harsh, and survival requires constant vigilance. You can't rest for long. Other creatures are hunting too, and some of them consider you prey. Centipedes are your biggest threat. These segmented predators move through the soil with disturbing speed, their venomous fangs capable of paralyzing creatures much larger than themselves. When you encounter one, retreat is usually your best option. Their multiple legs give them superior mobility in tight spaces, and their armor-like exoskeleton makes them difficult to injure. You've learned to recognize their scent, the chemical signature they leave in their wake. When you detect it, you dig in a different direction. Ground beetles pose another danger. Unlike their larvae, which you hunt, adult ground beetles are formidable predators in their own right. Their powerful mandibles can crush your bones, and their speed through loose soil rivals your own. Encounters with them are brief and violent. Either you escape quickly, or you don't escape at all. You've had close calls, situations where only your ability to compress your body and squeeze through impossibly tight spaces saved your life. Even other frogs can be threats, not your own species. Indian purple frogs are too rare to encounter often, but other burrowing amphibians that share your underground habitat. Competition for food is fierce, and larger frogs won't hesitate to eat smaller ones. You've learned to avoid areas with their scent markers, territories claimed by individuals bigger and stronger than yourself. The seasonal changes above ground affect your underground world in subtle but important ways. During the dry season, the soil becomes harder, more compacted. Digging requires more energy, and prey becomes scarcer as other creatures dig deeper to find moisture. You have to adapt, conserving energy hunting more selectively. During the wet season, the soil becomes softer, but also more unstable. Tunnels can collapse without warning, trapping unwary creatures. Water seepage creates muddy conditions that make movement more difficult, but also brings earthworms closer to the surface. Your growth continues steadily. What started as a tiny hatchling no bigger than a grape has become a substantial underground predator. Your body has thickened, your limbs have strengthened, and your hunting skills have sharpened through constant practice. You're still small compared to surface frogs, but in the underground world, size isn't everything. Efficiency matters more than bulk, and you're becoming increasingly efficient at extracting resources from this buried ecosystem. The tunnels you've created form an extensive network beneath the forest floor. Some passages lead to hunting grounds rich with prey. Others connect to water sources, underground streams, and seepage areas where moisture collects. A few serve as emergency escape routes, dead ends where you can retreat when threatened. This tunnel system represents months of labor, countless hours of digging through dirt and clay and rock. It's your territory, your kingdom in the darkness. But as you grow larger and stronger, new instincts begin to stir. Deep in your genetic memory, ancient patterns start to assert themselves. The underground world that has been your entire existence is just the beginning of your story. Somewhere far above, beyond the soil and roots and darkness, another world waits. A world of light and air and water. A world you've never seen, but somehow know you must eventually visit. The surface calls to you, though you don't yet understand why. For now, you continue your underground existence, hunting and digging and growing. But change is coming. The seasonal patterns are shifting, and with them, your body is preparing for a transformation that will take you away from everything you've known. The darkness that has been your home will soon give way to something entirely different. Your life as an Indian purple frog has only just begun, and the most challenging parts still lie ahead. The calling becomes stronger each day. Your body feels different, heavier, more restless. The tunnels that once felt spacious now seem cramped around your expanding form. You've grown larger than you ever imagined possible during those first weeks underground. Your stubby legs have thickened with muscle, your pointed snout has broadened, and your skin has taken on a deeper, richer purple hue that you can't see in the absolute darkness, but somehow sense. Something is changing in the soil above you. The vibrations are different, more frequent, more intense. Water is moving through the earth in ways you've never experienced before. The dry season is ending, and the monsoon rains are beginning to saturate the ground. Moisture seeps down through layers of dirt and clay, reaching depths that have been bone dry for months. The scent of wet earth fills your tunnels, carrying with it chemical signals that trigger responses deep in your brain. You dig upward for the first time in your life, not horizontally through familiar soil layers, but vertically towards something you've never seen. Your body knows what to do, even though your mind doesn't understand. Each push upward brings you closer to a world that exists only in your genetic memory. The soil becomes looser, softer, easier to move through. Roots become more numerous, and you can sense plant life thriving somewhere above your head. Then you feel it, a sensation completely alien to everything you've experienced. Air. Not the stale, humid atmosphere of underground burrows, but fresh air moving through space. Your snout breaks through the surface of the soil, and suddenly the world explodes with sensations your underground existence never prepared you for. Light, dim and filtered through forest canopy, but light nonetheless, hits your eyes for the first time. The shock is overwhelming. You instinctively pull back, retreating a few inches into familiar darkness. But the calling won't let you rest. Your body pushes you forward again, breaking through the surface completely. You emerge into a world so vast and open that your mind struggles to process it. Above you, space extends impossibly high, filled with moving shadows and dancing patterns of light and dark. Around you, giant structures, trees, tower overhead like living mountains. The forest floor stretches in all directions, covered with fallen leaves and scattered debris. The sounds are incredible. Underground, your world was mostly silent, except for the subtle vibrations of moving creatures. Here, the air fills with noise, rustling leaves, creaking branches, the calls of birds and insects. Water drips from surfaces you can't identify, creating rhythmic patterns that echo through the forest. Wind moves through the canopy, generating a constant whisper that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. You take your first steps on solid ground. The surface is uneven, covered with obstacles that don't exist in your tunnel world. Fallen branches, scattered rocks, thick mats of decomposing leaves. Everything presents a new challenge for legs designed for digging rather than walking. Your movements are clumsy and uncertain. You stumble over small logs, slip on wet leaves, and struggle to maintain balance on terrain that shifts and moves beneath your feet. But you persist because you must. The genetic programming that brought you to the surface won't let you retreat. Somewhere in this overwhelming environment, you have a purpose. Your body knows what it needs to do, even if your conscious mind remains confused and frightened. You move slowly through the forest, following instincts older than individual memory. The first thing you notice is water, lots of it. The monsoon rains have transformed the normally dry forest floor into a network of temporary streams and standing pools. Water collects in every depression, creating hundreds of small ponds that will exist only for the brief weeks of the rainy season. The sound of flowing water draws you forward, though you don't yet understand why. Your skin begins to feel different in this new environment. The constant moisture in the air hydrates your body in ways that underground humidity never could. Your purple coloration becomes more vibrant, more pronounced. But the surface world also presents dangers your underground existence never included. The temperature fluctuates wildly compared to the stable conditions below ground. Direct sunlight, even filtered through leaves, feels harsh against skin adapted to perpetual darkness. Predators here are different too. Underground, threats came from other burrowing creatures, centipedes, beetles, competing frogs. On the surface, danger approaches from multiple dimensions. Birds circle overhead, their sharp eyes scanning for small moving targets. Snakes glide through the undergrowth, following scent trails with patient precision. Small mammals rustle through the leaf litter, some harmless, others capable of crushing a frog your size without effort. You learn quickly that movement attracts attention. Every step, every shift in position, potentially signals your presence to creatures that consider you food. You adopt a strategy of short bursts of movement, followed by long periods of motionless waiting. When you must move, you stay close to cover. Fallen logs, dense vegetation, anything that provides concealment from watching eyes. The water calls to you more strongly now. Your body craves immersion in ways you never experienced underground. When you finally reach the edge of a temporary pond, you hesitate only briefly before entering the water. The sensation is extraordinary. Your skin absorbs moisture directly. Your body feels weightless for the first time. You can actually swim, though clumsily, using your stubby legs to paddle through the shallow water. But you're not alone in the pond. Other creatures have also been drawn to this temporary oasis. Insects skim across the surface, creating ripples that distort the reflected canopy above. Tadpoles, the larvae of other frog species, dart through the water in coordinated schools. Fish, somehow transported here by the flooding rains, cruise slowly through the deeper sections. The diversity is staggering compared to your simple underground ecosystem. You're not here to hunt, though. Something else drives your presence at this temporary pond. Other Indian purple frogs are emerging from their own underground territories, drawn by the same irresistible impulse that brought you to the surface. You've never seen another of your kind, but you recognize them instantly. The same bloated body shape, the same pointed snout, the same distinctive purple coloration. They move with the same awkward gait on land, the same clumsy swimming style in water. But there's something different about some of them. The largest individuals carry themselves with a new kind of confidence, their bodies swollen with purpose you don't yet understand. They position themselves in specific locations around the pond's edge, claiming territories with aggressive displays. When smaller frogs like yourself approach too closely, they respond with warning calls, deep, resonant sounds that carry through both air and water. The calling becomes vocal now. The males, for that's what these territorial individuals are, begin to sing. Their songs are unlike anything in your experience, deep bass notes that seem to emerge from the earth itself. The sound vibrates through your body, awakening responses you didn't know existed. Each male has his own unique call, his own rhythm, and pitch that distinguishes him from the others. The forest fills with this amphibian chorus, a soundtrack to the brief breeding season that justifies your species' entire existence. You listen to these songs with growing understanding. Your body is changing in response to the calls, to the water, to the presence of other frogs. Hormones surge through your system, triggering transformations that prepare you for the next phase of your life. Your skin begins producing chemicals that will play crucial roles in the interactions to come. Your behavior patterns shift as ancient instincts override the survival programming that kept you alive underground. The temporary ponds won't last long. The monsoon season is brief, and when the rains stop, these breeding grounds will evaporate within weeks. Everything must happen quickly: mating, egg-laying, the creation of the next generation. There's no time for extended courtship or careful partner selection. The biological imperative demands immediate action from every frog that made the journey to the surface. You watch the interactions around you with fascination and growing participation. Smaller males like yourself cluster around the territories of the larger, more dominant singers. Some attempt to intercept females before they reach the prime breeding sites. Others engage in satellite strategies, remaining silent and hoping to mate opportunistically when the territorial males are distracted. The competition is fierce, but brief. Everyone understands the time constraints. The females are impressive when they finally arrive, larger than any frog you've encountered, their bodies swollen with eggs ready for fertilization. They move through the water with purpose, evaluating the calling males and their territories. Their choices will determine which genetic lines continue and which disappear forever. The pressure on every individual is enormous, but particularly on the males who must prove their worth in just a few short weeks. Your own role in this drama is still unclear. Your body hasn't reached full maturity, and your voice lacks the deep resonance of the established territorial males. But you're here, and that means you have some part to play in the species' continuation. You position yourself strategically, watching for opportunities, learning the complex social dynamics that govern this brief surface existence. The pond ecosystem transforms rapidly as more frogs arrive. The water becomes crowded with amphibian bodies. the air thick with competing calls. Aggressive encounters break out as males dispute territory boundaries. Smaller frogs are displaced by larger ones in a constant shuffle of dominance and submission. The temporary nature of this gathering intensifies every interaction. There are no second chances, no opportunities to wait for better conditions. As the days pass, your understanding of surface life deepens. You learn to recognize the different bird calls that might signal approaching danger. You discover which plants provide the best cover during daylight hours. Means you identify the safest routes between water and shelter, the paths that minimize exposure to aerial predators. This knowledge comes at a cost. Several times you barely escape the strikes of hunting birds, the lunges of opportunistic snakes. But the learning continues because survival depends on adaptation. The surface world operates by rules completely different from your underground existence. Success here requires different strategies, different instincts, different responses to threat and opportunity. Your body adapts to the new environment, while your mind processes experiences that no amount of genetic programming could have prepared you for. The calling grows stronger, more urgent, as the breeding season reaches its peak intensity. Your time on the surface serves a purpose beyond your individual survival, and that purpose becomes clearer with each passing night. Soon, you'll understand exactly why your species makes this dangerous journey from the safety of underground burrows to the chaos and opportunity of the surface world. The most important phase of your life as an Indian purple frog is about to begin. The nights grow more intense as your body reaches sexual maturity. Your voice deepens, developing the resonant quality that marks you as a potential mate. The transformation happens quickly. One day you're a silent observer. The next you're contributing your own bass notes to the forest chorus. Your call isn't as powerful as the established males, but it carries far enough to announce your presence to any females within range. You claim a small territory at the pond's edge, a modest section of muddy bank between two fallen branches. It's not prime real estate. The larger males control the deeper water access points and the most acoustically favorable positions, but it's yours, and you defend it with surprising aggression against other young males who attempt to encroach. Your stubby legs, so perfect for underground digging, prove adequate for the wrestling matches that determine territorial boundaries. The calling consumes enormous energy. Each deep bass note requires your entire body to contract, forcing air through specialized vocal sacs that inflate like balloons on either side of your throat. You call for hours at a time, only stopping to catch insects attracted by the pond's activity or to engage in brief territorial disputes. Your underground hunting skills serve you well. The moths and beetles drawn to the water are easy targets for a frog accustomed to precise strikes in total darkness. A female approaches your territory on the fourth night of your calling. She's massive compared to you, her body distended with eggs that represent the future of your species. Her skin glistens with moisture, the same deep purple as your own, but somehow more vibrant in the dim forest light. She moves slowly through the shallow water, evaluating your calls, your territory, your fitness as a potential mate. You intensify your calling, putting everything into each resonant note. The competition is fierce. Larger males nearby are doing the same, their voices drowning out your smaller contribution to the chorus. But she continues moving in your direction, seemingly drawn by something in your particular call pattern. Your heart pounds as she approaches, genetic programming overriding rational thought. Then she's there, in your territory, her massive form dwarfing your own. The mating embrace that follows is awkward and desperate. You climb onto her back, your front legs wrapping around her swollen body, just behind her front limbs. Your grip must be perfect. Too loose, and you'll slip off. Too tight, and you might injure her. She carries you deeper into the water, where the actual egg laying will take place. The process unfolds over several hours. She releases her eggs in long, gelatinous strings that drift through the water like organic pearls. You fertilize each strand as it emerges, your body positioned to ensure maximum success. The coordination required is extraordinary. Millions of years of evolution have fine-tuned this underwater dance between male and female. Your underground existence, your dangerous journey to the surface, your brief time claiming territory, everything has led to these crucial moments. The eggs settle onto submerged vegetation and debris at the pond's bottom. They're large for frog eggs, each one containing enough nutrients to support development without external feeding. Within days, they'll hatch into tadpoles unlike any other amphibian larvae. Your offspring will have specialized mouthparts designed for scraping algae and organic matter from rock surfaces. They'll develop in these temporary pools, racing against time before the water disappears. Your mate moves away once the egg laying is complete, already seeking other territories and additional mating opportunities. Her strategy is to spread her reproductive investment across multiple males, ensuring genetic diversity in her offspring. You don't follow her, your role is finished, and attempting to monopolize her would only waste energy you need for other encounters. More females arrive over the following nights. Your success with the first gives you confidence, and your calling becomes more aggressive, more persistent. You manage to mate with 2 additional females before your voice begins to crack from overuse. Each encounter follows the same pattern: the careful approach, the awkward embrace, the underwater egg fertilization. By the end of the breeding season, you've contributed genetic material to hundreds of developing embryos. But the temporary ponds won't support this many tadpoles. The ecosystem can only sustain a fraction of the eggs being laid throughout the forest. Competition begins before hatching, as developing embryos compete for limited space and resources. Many eggs will fail to develop properly. Others will hatch only to starve in overcrowded conditions. The brutal mathematics of amphibian reproduction ensure that only the strongest, fastest developing larvae survive. Your tadpoles face additional challenges beyond simple overcrowding. The temporary pools are constantly changing as water levels fluctuate with rainfall patterns. Too much rain, and the delicate ecosystem balance collapses under dilution and flooding. Too little, and the pools begin evaporating before metamorphosis can occur. The window for successful development is measured in weeks, not months. Predators exploit the abundance of amphibian larvae. Diving beetles, dragonfly nymphs, and small fish consume tadpoles by the hundreds. Birds visit the pools regularly, picking off surface feeders with casual efficiency. Even other tadpole species compete for resources and space, engaging in chemical warfare that can poison entire sections of the breeding pools. The successful tadpoles, your offspring among them, develop with remarkable speed. Within 2 weeks, they've grown from tiny embryos to substantial larvae with powerful sucker mouths and streamlined bodies. Their specialized feeding apparatus allows them to extract nutrients from surfaces other tadpoles can't exploit, giving them a competitive advantage in the crowded pools. But they're still vulnerable, still racing against time and environmental pressure. Meanwhile, your own surface adventure nears its end. The breeding season lasts only as long as the temporary pools remain viable, typically 4 to 6 weeks, depending on rainfall patterns. As the rains begin to diminish and water levels start dropping, the urgency of mating gives way to new survival imperatives. The forest floor that seemed so welcoming during the wet season becomes increasingly hostile as moisture disappears. Your body begins preparing for the return journey underground. The hormones that drove your surface behavior fade, replaced by the familiar instincts that kept you alive in the buried world. Your skin texture changes, becoming more resistant to abrasion from soil contact. Your muscles shift emphasis from swimming and calling to the powerful digging motions you'll need for tunnel excavation. The other males are experiencing the same transformation. The competitive calling that dominated every night begins to fade as territories become meaningless. Aggressive encounters decrease in frequency and intensity. The social structure that briefly organized your species around breeding opportunities dissolves back into the solitary existence that characterizes most of your lives. You make your final visit to the breeding pond before beginning your descent. The water level has dropped noticeably, concentrating the remaining tadpoles into smaller and smaller spaces. Your offspring are among them, larger now, more developed, but still weeks away from the metamorphosis that will allow them to leave the water. They'll complete their transformation without you, following genetic instructions that require no parental guidance. The journey back underground feels different from your initial surface emergence. You know what awaits you in the buried world: familiar tunnels, predictable hunting grounds, the stable environment that sustained you for your first year of life. But you also carry new knowledge now, surface experiences that have expanded your understanding of existence beyond the soil boundaries. You begin digging at the same location where you first emerged, following scent markers your body left during those initial confused moments on the surface. The soil feels welcoming after weeks of navigating unpredictable terrain and weather conditions. Your stubby legs remember their primary function, driving you deeper with each powerful stroke. The darkness that once seemed absolute now feels comfortable, protective. The return journey takes several days as you excavate new tunnels and reopen collapsed passages from your original burrow system. Some areas have changed during your absence. Root growth has blocked familiar paths. Seasonal flooding has altered soil composition. Other creatures have moved into abandoned sections. But the basic layout remains intact, and you quickly reestablish your underground territory. Your hunting skills haven't diminished during the surface interlude. If anything, they've improved through the diverse feeding opportunities the breeding season provided. You apply new techniques learned from capturing flying insects to your pursuit of underground prey. Your strike accuracy increases, your energy efficiency improves, your ability to locate hidden food sources sharpens through cross-training between environments. The underground ecosystem welcomes your return. Your presence fills a gap in the soil food web that your absence created. Earthworm populations have increased without your predation pressure, creating abundant hunting opportunities. Beetle larvae have expanded their ranges into areas you previously controlled, providing new targets for your refined hunting techniques. The buried world continues its ancient rhythms, and you resume your place in its complex interactions. But something fundamental has changed in your relationship with the underground environment. The surface experience has given you a broader perspective on existence, an understanding that your species connects to something larger than individual survival. The knowledge that you've contributed genetic material to the next generation adds meaning to your continued underground existence. Your body settles back into the rhythms of subterranean life. The daily cycle of hunting, digging, and resting resumes its familiar pattern. Your muscles readapt to the constant soil contact. Your eyes lose the sensitivity to light they briefly developed. Your vocal apparatus returns to the silent efficiency required for underground predation. Within weeks, it's as if the surface interlude never happened, except for the knowledge. Deep in your memory, the experience of air and light and open space remains. The sensation of water supporting your entire body, the sound of wind through leaves, the complexity of surface ecosystems, all of it stays with you as you navigate your tunnel system. You carry the surface world with you into the buried darkness, a connection between two very different modes of existence. The seasonal cycle continues above your head. The temporary breeding pools evaporate as planned, concentrating your developing offspring into smaller and more challenging environments. Some tadpoles complete their metamorphosis successfully, developing the adult characteristics that will eventually drive them underground. Others succumb to predation, disease, or simple overcrowding. The brutal selection pressure ensures that only the most adaptable individuals survive to join the adult population. Your successful offspring begin their own underground journeys, following the same genetic programming that guided your early development. They'll spend the next year learning to hunt in darkness, developing the specialized adaptations that allow survival in soil ecosystems, building the strength and knowledge necessary for their own eventual surface emergence. The cycle that began with your parents continues through your reproductive success, but that's still in the future. For now, you've returned to the life you know best, the patient predator of the underground world, the efficient harvester of soil-dwelling prey, the master of tunnel systems that stretch through acres of forest floor. Your brief surface adventure has ended, but its effects will influence every aspect of your continued existence. The calling that brought you to the surface has quieted, replaced by the steady pulse of underground survival. You dig deeper into familiar territory, ready to spend another year in the darkness before the next breeding season calls you back to the light. The seasons pass above you in ways you barely notice. Down here, temperature stays constant, moisture levels remain stable, and the complex weather patterns that dominate surface life become irrelevant background noise. You settle into the rhythm of underground existence, hunt, dig, rest, repeat. Your tunnel system expands slowly but steadily, each new passage carefully excavated to maximize hunting efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. Your body adapts back to subterranean life with remarkable speed. The muscle groups that briefly developed for surface movement atrophy, while your digging muscles strengthen beyond their previous capacity. Your skin thickens where it contacts soil most frequently, developing calluses that protect against constant abrasion. Your metabolism slows to match the steady food availability of the underground ecosystem, conserving energy for the long stretches between successful hunts. The prey patterns shift with the seasons in subtle ways. During the dry months, earthworms retreat deeper, following moisture lines that require you to extend your tunnels further than usual. Beetle larvae become more abundant as surface insects lay their eggs in the stable soil conditions. Ant colonies adjust their foraging patterns, creating new opportunities for the patient predator willing to position themselves along established trails. You develop preferences based on energy return versus hunting effort. Large earthworms provide excellent nutrition, but require significant energy to locate and capture. Small insects are easier to catch, but barely sustain your metabolic needs. Beetle larvae offer the best compromise, substantial nutrition with moderate hunting difficulty. Your tunnel system gradually reorganizes around the areas where beetle activity concentrates most heavily. Competition exists even in the underground world. Other burrowing creatures share your habitat, some competing directly for the same food sources. Moles create their own tunnel systems that occasionally intersect yours, leading to tense encounters in confined spaces. Shrews hunt some of the same prey species, their higher metabolic rates making them more aggressive competitors. Large centipedes remain constant threats, their venomous bites capable of ending your life within minutes. You learn to read the chemical signatures left by other creatures. Each species leaves distinct scent markers in the soil, territorial boundaries, hunting trails, warning signals about danger. Your sensitive snout becomes a sophisticated analysis tool, processing information about who has passed through which areas and when. This chemical landscape guides your movements as much as the physical geography of tunnels and soil layers. The underground ecosystem proves more complex than your juvenile understanding suggested. Fungal networks spread through the soil like living internet cables, connecting distant plant roots and facilitating chemical communication across vast areas. Bacterial communities break down organic matter at different rates depending on soil chemistry and moisture levels. Root systems create microenvironments with unique conditions that support specialized creature communities. You become an expert at exploiting these microenvironments. Areas where large tree roots create air pockets support different prey species than the dense clay layers between root zones. Decomposing logs buried in the soil become hunting gold mines, their soft interior wood providing habitat for numerous beetle species. Stream beds, even when dry on the surface, maintain underground moisture that attracts earthworms and other water-dependent creatures. Your hunting techniques evolve through constant practice. The ambush tactics that served you as a juvenile develop into sophisticated predation strategies. You learn to predict earthworm movement patterns based on soil moisture and temperature fluctuations. Your strike timing improves to the point where missed attacks become rare occurrences. The energy efficiency of your hunting reaches levels that would have seemed impossible during your clumsy early attempts. But efficiency comes with risks. Overconfidence leads to careless mistakes that nearly cost you everything. A large centipede almost catches you when you focus too intensely on stalking a beetle larva. A collapsed tunnel section traps you for hours before you manage to dig your way free. A territorial encounter with another purple frog, one of your own species that chose a different underground territory, results in injuries that take weeks to heal properly. These close calls remind you that survival requires constant vigilance. The underground world may seem stable compared to the chaotic surface environment, but it contains its own deadly surprises. Sudden soil shifts can bury you alive. Underground streams can flood tunnel systems without warning. Toxic gases from decomposing organic matter can accumulate in poorly ventilated areas, creating death traps for unwary creatures. You develop emergency protocols for these situations. Multiple escape routes from every hunting area ensure you're never trapped in a single location. Cache sites scattered throughout your territory store emergency food supplies for times when hunting becomes impossible. Safe zones in the deepest, most stable soil layers provide refuge during environmental emergencies or when recovering from injuries. The deeper you dig, the more ancient the soil becomes. Layers deposited decades or even centuries ago contain different chemical compositions, different organic content, different physical properties. Some areas are so compacted that digging becomes nearly impossible. Others are so loose that tunnel walls collapse constantly. You learn to read soil history through texture, smell, and resistance to excavation. Archaeological discoveries mark your deepest excavations. Fragments of bone from long-dead animals, pieces of pottery from human settlements, chunks of charcoal from ancient fires, all buried and forgotten until your tunnels expose them to the darkness once again. These artifacts mean nothing to you functionally, but they represent the deep time scales over which your species has existed in these underground realms. Your territory expands to cover several acres of forest floor, connected by a network of tunnels that would impress any engineer. Main thoroughfares allow rapid movement between distant hunting grounds. Secondary passages provide access to specialized microenvironments. Emergency routes offer escape options when predators threaten your primary pathways. The system represents years of careful excavation and represents your life's work in soil and darkness. Other purple frogs occasionally intersect your territory, leading to tense negotiations over boundary rights. These encounters rarely result in violence. Your species seems to prefer territorial disputes, resolved through displays of size and aggression rather than actual combat. The largest, oldest frogs command respect through sheer presence, while younger individuals like yourself must prove worthiness through demonstrated hunting skills and tunnel quality. You participate in these underground social hierarchies without fully understanding their complexity. Scent markers become diplomatic communications, chemical messages that convey information about territory size, food availability, and individual fitness. Your own markers grow stronger and more complex as you mature, reflecting your increasing status within the buried community. The second year underground passes more quickly than the first. Experience accelerates your adaptation to seasonal changes, your responses to environmental challenges, your efficiency in all aspects of subterranean survival. You're no longer learning basic skills. You're refining advanced techniques that separate expert survivors from merely adequate ones. Your success rate in hunting approaches perfection. Your energy management becomes nearly optimal. Your threat assessment develops razor-sharp accuracy. But success breeds restlessness. The same genetic programming that drove your parents to the surface begins stirring in your own consciousness. The underground world that once challenged every aspect of your being now feels routine, predictable, almost boring. You find yourself digging upward more frequently, approaching the soil surface without quite breaking through. The chemical signals filtering down from above carry increasingly compelling messages about changes in the world beyond your buried realm. The monsoon season approaches again, and with it, the irresistible calling that will force you back to the surface. Your body begins preparing for the transformation, hormonal changes that will modify your behavior, physical adaptations that will allow survival in the chaotic above-ground environment, vocal developments that will enable participation in the breeding chorus. The underground predator you've become must temporarily transform into something entirely different. You remember the previous year's surface experience with mixed emotions, terror at the overwhelming sensory input, confusion about navigating three-dimensional space, constant fear of aerial predators, but also the incredible satisfaction of successful mating, the community experience of joining your species' breeding aggregation, the profound sense of purpose that justified your entire underground existence. The calling grows stronger each day as your second breeding season approaches. Your body swells with reproductive readiness. Your voice deepens in preparation for territorial calling. Your behavior patterns shift from solitary hunting to the social dynamics required for surface survival. The transformation happens gradually but inexorably, driven by genetic programming millions of years in the making. Your tunnel system, so carefully constructed and maintained over 2 years of underground life, becomes less important as the surface imperative grows stronger. You'll abandon it temporarily, trusting that the basic structure will survive your absence and remain available for your eventual return. Other creatures will certainly exploit your abandoned territory, but the fundamental architecture of your underground domain should endure. The last earthworm you catch before beginning your surface journey tastes different, not because the worm has changed, but because your sensory priorities are shifting toward the demands of above-ground existence. Your final inspection of tunnel boundaries carries ceremonial weight, a farewell to the buried world that has sustained you for 2 years of continuous growth and development. You position yourself beneath the same soil location where you first emerged, following scent markers that remain detectable despite a year of weathering and environmental change. The familiar spot represents more than just geographical convenience. It's your personal connection point between the two worlds you inhabit, the portal through which you transform from underground predator to surface breeder. The digging begins, but this time you know what awaits above. The overwhelming sensory experience will still challenge your adapted underground senses, but you have experience now, memory of how to navigate the complex three-dimensional environment that exists beyond soil boundaries. You understand the risks and opportunities, the social dynamics, and survival requirements of surface life. Each pawful of soil moved upward brings you closer to the light, closer to the temporary pools where your species gathers for its brief annual celebration of reproduction and genetic continuity. Your second breeding season will be different from your first, more confident, more strategic, more focused on maximizing reproductive success rather than simply surviving the overwhelming transition from buried to surface existence. The underground world fades behind you as you dig toward the surface, but it doesn't disappear. Deep in your memory, the knowledge of tunnel systems and soil hunting and buried predation remains intact, waiting for your eventual return. You carry the darkness with you into the light, just as you previously carried surface memories into the underground depths. Your life as an Indian purple frog continues its ancient cycle between two radically different worlds, each requiring complete adaptation, each offering unique challenges and rewards. The calling grows stronger with every inch of soil you move aside, drawing you inexorably toward the surface drama that justifies your species' entire evolutionary strategy. The light grows closer, and with it, the next chapter of your extraordinary amphibian existence. You break through the surface for the second time, but everything feels different now. The overwhelming sensory assault that nearly drove you back underground last year now registers as manageable chaos. Your eyes adjust to the filtered forest light more quickly. Your ears process the symphony of surface sounds without complete confusion. You still prefer the predictable darkness below, but you can function here now. The forest has changed during your year-long absence. Different trees dominate the canopy, fallen logs have shifted positions, and new water channels have carved themselves into the landscape. But the basic geography remains familiar enough to navigate. You know which routes offer the best cover from aerial predators, which areas provide the richest insect hunting, which paths lead most efficiently to the temporary breeding pools. Your body carries the confidence of survival experience. The stubby legs that stumbled so awkwardly through surface debris now move with purpose and efficiency. Your skin adapts to air exposure more rapidly, maintaining proper moisture levels without the constant threat of dehydration. Most importantly, your voice emerges stronger than before, deeper and more resonant, capable of competing with the established territorial males. The breeding pools have formed in slightly different locations this year, shifted by changes in rainfall patterns and ground topology. Some of your previous year's breeding sites have dried into mere depressions, while new pools have appeared in areas that were bone dry 12 months ago. The temporary nature of these aquatic habitats means constant adaptation, constant exploration to locate the most suitable breeding opportunities. You establish territory more aggressively this time, claiming a prime location near deep water access rather than settling for marginal space between dominant males. Your size and experience command respect from younger frogs making their first surface emergence. When challenged, you respond with confident displays that usually resolve disputes without physical confrontation. Your year of underground hunting has built muscle mass and reaction speed that translates into surface dominance. The calling begins earlier and continues longer than your previous breeding season. Your voice carries further through the forest, attracting females from greater distances. The deep bass notes that emerge from your throat resonate with authority earned through survival and successful reproduction. Other males respond to your calls with either answering challenges or submissive retreat, depending on their own size and confidence levels. Competition is fierce among the returning males. Many of your previous year's competitors have survived their underground year and returned with their own increased size and experience. New frogs joined the breeding aggregation, some larger than you despite their youth, others smaller but more aggressive in their territorial claims. The social dynamics shift constantly as individuals assess and reassess their relative positions in the hierarchy. Your first mating of the season occurs within days of establishing territory. The female approaches with deliberate purpose, having evaluated multiple calling males before selecting you as a suitable partner. The embrace feels more natural this time, your positioning more secure, your coordination with her egg-laying rhythm more precise. The underwater dance of fertilization proceeds smoothly, each movement choreographed by genetic memory and refined through experience. But success brings complications. Your proven fertility attracts additional females, creating scheduling conflicts as multiple partners seek access to your territory simultaneously. Managing these interactions requires diplomatic skills you didn't know you possessed, timing your availability, maintaining territorial boundaries, ensuring each mating receives proper attention without exhausting your resources completely. The pond ecosystem develops differently this year due to environmental variations. Rainfall patterns have created deeper pools that support more diverse communities of aquatic life. Your tadpoles will face different competitive pressures, different predation threats, different resource availability than last year's offspring. Some changes favor their survival chances. Others create new challenges that will test their adaptability. You observe other species exploiting the temporary pools in ways you hadn't noticed before. Tree frogs descend from the canopy to add their own reproductive efforts to the aquatic chaos. Salamanders emerge from hidden retreats to breed alongside the amphibian community. Fish populations, somehow transported by flooding or underground connections, establish temporary residence in the deeper pools. The breeding season creates a brief explosion of life that transforms the forest floor into a bustling aquatic metropolis. Your own reproductive success exceeds your previous year's efforts. Multiple successful matings with healthy females ensure that hundreds of your fertilized eggs develop in pools throughout your territory. The genetic diversity represented by different maternal contributions increases the likelihood that some offspring will possess the specific trait combinations necessary for survival in an unpredictable environment. But quantity doesn't guarantee success. The overcrowded pools create intense competition among developing tadpoles. Well, your offspring must compete not only with siblings, but with the larvae of other purple frogs, other amphibian species, and the various aquatic predators that exploit the seasonal abundance. Many eggs will never hatch properly. Many tadpoles will starve before completing metamorphosis. Many young frogs will succumb to predation during their vulnerable transitional phase. The temporary nature of the breeding pools adds urgency to every aspect of reproduction. Water levels fluctuate daily with rainfall variations, concentrating or diluting the developing communities. Temperature changes affect developmental rates, potentially accelerating or slowing the race toward metamorphosis. Chemical changes in the water chemistry influence survival rates in ways that remain unpredictable despite millions of years of evolutionary refinement. You extend your surface, stay longer this year, monitoring your breeding territories even after the peak mating period passes. The extended presence allows you to mate with late arriving females and defend your territorial claims against opportunistic males seeking to exploit established resources. But the longer surface exposure also increases your vulnerability to predation and environmental stress. A close encounter with the forest cobra reminds you why your species minimizes surface time. The snake detects your movement despite your careful concealment and approaches with patient precision. Only your experience with underground tunnel navigation saves you. You compress your body and squeeze through a gap between rocks that the cobra cannot follow. The incident reinforces the wisdom of limiting surface exposure to essential reproductive activities. Weather patterns shift as the breeding season progresses, bringing irregular rainfall that threatens the stability of breeding pools. Some pools evaporate faster than anticipated, concentrating tadpole populations into increasingly crowded conditions. Others flood beyond their normal boundaries, diluting the carefully balanced aquatic chemistry that supports amphibian development. You watch helplessly as environmental forces beyond your control influence the fate of your reproductive investment. Your most successful breeding pool maintains stable conditions throughout the critical development period. The tadpoles, your offspring among them, grow rapidly under optimal conditions. Their specialized sucker mouths allow them to feed efficiently on algae and organic matter that other species cannot exploit. Within weeks, they've developed into substantial larvae with the characteristic purple coloration that marks them as your descendants. But even optimal development cannot eliminate all risks. Dragonfly nymphs patrol the deeper water, their powerful jaws capable of consuming tadpoles wholesale. Water beetles dive through the tadpole schools, selecting the largest and most nutritious individuals for consumption. Birds visit the pools regularly, their sharp eyes detecting movement from considerable distances. The mathematical brutality of amphibian reproduction ensures that survival remains a matter of probability rather than certainty. The metamorphosis begins as the breeding season winds down. Your most advanced offspring develop the adult characteristics that will enable their own underground existence. The pointed snouts for soil penetration, the stubby legs for efficient digging, the robust body shape for navigating tight tunnel spaces. But they remain vulnerable during the transitional phase, neither fully aquatic nor completely terrestrial. You observe their first attempts at surface movement with mixed emotions. Pride at their successful development combines with concern for their survival prospects. The young frogs move awkwardly on land, their newly developed limbs uncertain on unfamiliar terrain. Many will not survive their first attempts at underground excavation. Others will fall victim to surface predators during their vulnerable learning phase. Only the strongest and most adaptable will establish successful underground territories. Your own surface season draws to a close as water levels in the breeding pools drop beyond sustainable levels. The temporary aquatic habitats that supported your reproductive efforts begin their annual disappearance, forcing all remaining amphibians to seek alternative environments. For your species, that means a return to the underground world that provides year-round stability and resources. The journey back underground feels routine now, lacking the uncertainty that characterized your first descent 2 years ago. You know what awaits below: familiar hunting grounds, predictable environmental conditions, the solitary existence that defines most of your life. But you also carry new knowledge from this breeding season, enhanced understanding of surface dynamics and reproductive strategies that will influence your future emergence patterns. Your tunnel system requires extensive renovation after a year of abandonment. Other creatures have moved into vacant sections, requiring diplomatic negotiations or forceful evictions to reestablish your territorial claims. Some passages have collapsed due to seasonal ground shifts, necessitating complete re-excavation. Root growth has blocked familiar routes, forcing the creation of alternative pathways through virgin soil. But the basic infrastructure remains intact, and you quickly re-establish the underground domain that sustained you for 2 years of continuous growth. Your hunting skills have not diminished during the surface interlude. If anything, they've improved through the diverse feeding opportunities the breeding season provided. The precision strikes that captured flying insects translate into enhanced accuracy when pursuing underground prey. The earthworm populations have exploded during your absence, creating abundant hunting opportunities in areas that were marginal food sources before your surface emergence. Beetle larvae have established new colonies in sections of your territory that were previously unexploited. The underground ecosystem has continued its ancient cycles, and your return restores predation pressures that help maintain ecological balance. Your 3rd year of underground existence begins with the confidence of proven survival skills and successful reproduction. You're no longer learning basic techniques or discovering fundamental principles of subterranean life. Instead, you're refining advanced strategies, optimizing energy efficiency, and expanding your territorial control through systematic tunnel excavation and prey management. The seasonal cycles above ground affect your underground world in subtle but important ways. You can sense the changing moisture patterns that indicate shifting weather systems, the temperature fluctuations that influence soil organism activity, the chemical changes that result from varying plant growth and decay rates. Your understanding of these surface-subsurface connections deepens with each year of experience. Competition with other underground predators intensifies as your territory expands into areas controlled by different species. Moles create their own tunnel systems that occasionally intersect yours, leading to tense territorial negotiations. Shrews hunt some of the same prey species, their higher metabolic rates making them more aggressive competitors. Large centipedes remain constant threats, their venomous capabilities unchanged despite your increased size and experience. You develop increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies based on seasonal prey availability and behavioral patterns. During dry periods, you focus on areas where moisture concentrates earthworm populations. When soil conditions favor beetle reproduction, you adjust your tunnel priorities to exploit larval concentrations. Your underground territory becomes a carefully managed ecosystem designed to maximize hunting efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. The knowledge that you've successfully reproduced adds new meaning to your underground existence. Your genetic material continues developing in young frogs, now beginning their own subterranean journeys. Some of your offspring have undoubtedly survived the brutal selection pressures of tadpole development and metamorphosis. They're learning the same tunnel excavation techniques, the same prey capture methods, the same survival strategies that sustained your own development. But individual offspring remain unknown to you. Your species provides no parental care beyond the initial fertilization event, and you'll never identify specific individuals as your descendants. The genetic investment you made during the breeding season disperses into the anonymous underground population, contributing to species continuity without creating personal connections or family relationships. The underground world seems smaller now, more familiar, less challenging than during your early years of exploration and discovery. You know every soil layer within your territory, every root system that creates hunting opportunities, every seasonal change that affects prey availability. The mysterious buried realm that once threatened your survival at every turn has become a predictable environment where you function as an apex predator. Yet mastery brings its own form of restlessness. The same genetic programming that drove your surface emergence continues operating in the background of your consciousness, preparing for the next breeding season, even as you settle into underground routines. Your body begins the subtle changes that will enable another transformation from subterranean predator to surface breeder, another journey between the two worlds that define your species' existence. The calling that will summon you back to the light remains months away, but its influence grows stronger with each passing day. Your life as an Indian purple frog continues its ancient rhythm between buried darkness and surface chaos, each phase requiring complete adaptation, each transition testing your survival capabilities to their absolute limits. The underground predator you've become carries the memory of air and water and open space, just as the surface breeder you'll become will carry the knowledge of soil and tunnels and buried hunting grounds. You exist between worlds, master of both, belonging completely to neither, following an evolutionary strategy that has sustained your species through millions of years of environmental change and challenge. Your extraordinary amphibian existence continues, driven by forces older than individual memory, guided by instincts refined through countless generations of underground survival and surface reproduction. The third breeding season approaches with familiar urgency. Your body recognizes the signals before your conscious mind processes them. The shifting moisture patterns in the soil above, the subtle temperature changes that penetrate even your deepest tunnels, the chemical signatures carried by groundwater that speak of monsoon rains gathering strength. The transformation begins slowly, then accelerates as ancient hormonal cascades flood your system. You're larger now than during your previous surface emergences. 3 years of underground hunting have built muscle mass that commands respect, reflexes sharpened by countless successful strikes, territorial knowledge that spans acres of forest floor. When you break through the soil surface this time, you emerge not as a confused newcomer, but as an experienced competitor, ready to claim prime breeding territory. The forest greets you with changes both subtle and dramatic. New fallen trees have altered the landscape's water flow patterns, creating breeding pools in unexpected locations while eliminating others that supported your previous reproductive efforts. Younger trees have grown taller, shifting the canopy's light patterns and affecting which areas remain suitable for amphibian activity. The underground streams that feed surface pools have carved new channels, redirecting water away from traditional breeding sites toward virgin territory. Your emergence timing proves optimal. You arrive ahead of most competitors, allowing you to survey available territories and select the most advantageous position before aggressive males crowd the breeding areas. The pool you choose offers deep water access, excellent acoustic properties for territorial calling, and strategic positioning that allows monitoring of multiple approach routes. When other males begin arriving, they find you already established and defending prime real estate. The competition this year includes several individuals you recognize from previous breeding seasons, surviving males who've grown larger and more experienced during their own underground years. But you also notice absences, familiar voices missing from the developing chorus, surface predation, underground accidents, disease, simple aging. The brutal mathematics of amphibian mortality have claimed some of your previous competitors. Their territorial claims remain available for redistribution among the survivors. Your calling begins with confident bass notes that resonate through the forest with authority earned through proven survival and reproductive success. The deep tones carry further than ever before, attracting attention from females across wider areas while simultaneously warning other males about your territorial claims. Your voice has reached its full power, the result of physical maturation and vocal conditioning that only comes with experience. Territorial disputes arise quickly as the breeding aggregation reaches peak density. Younger males challenge your boundaries with the desperate aggression of first-time breeders, while established competitors probe for weaknesses in your defensive strategies. Most conflicts resolve through vocal intimidation and display behaviors, but physical confrontations become necessary when intruders refuse to respect clearly marked boundaries. Your increased size and experience provide decisive advantages in these wrestling matches. The first female approaches your territory on the third night of intensive calling. She's massive, even by breed and season standards, her body distended with an extraordinary egg load that promises exceptional reproductive potential. Her careful evaluation of your territorial claims, calling quality and physical condition, suggests sophisticated mate selection criteria refined through her own breeding experience. When she finally enters your territory, the decision represents validation of your status within the competitive hierarchy. The mating embrace unfolds with practiced efficiency. Your positioning achieves perfect stability. Your coordination with her egg-laying rhythm demonstrates experienced timing. Your fertilization technique maximizes success rates through precise sperm placement. The underwater ballet proceeds smoothly, each movement choreographed by genetic programming and perfected through repetition. This partnership will contribute hundreds of fertilized eggs to the developing tadpole communities, but exceptional success attracts complications. Word of your proven fertility spreads through chemical signals and behavioral observations, drawing additional females to your territory in numbers that exceed your previous breeding seasons. Managing multiple simultaneous partnerships requires diplomatic skills and energy management strategies that push your capabilities to their limits. Each female deserves proper attention, but resource allocation becomes increasingly challenging as demand outstrips supply. The breeding pools develop into complex ecosystems supporting unprecedented biodiversity. Your fertilized eggs join millions of others from various amphibian species, creating a temporary aquatic metropolis that transforms the forest floor into a thriving wetland. Competition for space and resources intensifies as tadpole populations explode, but the diversity also provides opportunities for your offspring to exploit specialized feeding niches unavailable to less adaptable larvae. Environmental conditions this year favor extended breeding season duration. Consistent rainfall maintains pool water levels longer than usual, allowing multiple waves of reproduction as late arriving females extend the mating period. You take advantage of these opportunities, continuing territorial defense and mating activities well beyond the typical breeding window. The extended surface exposure increases predation risks, but also maximizes reproductive potential. A significant environmental challenge emerges as the season progresses. Unusually heavy rainfall creates flooding that connects previously isolated breeding pools, allowing fish populations to spread throughout the temporary wetland system. These predators consume tadpoles at alarming rates, fundamentally altering the competitive landscape your offspring must navigate. Some pools become death traps, where fish eliminate entire amphibian communities. Others remain protected by geography or water chemistry that excludes piscine predators. You observe the fish invasion with growing concern, recognizing threats your genetic programming never anticipated. Climate change and human environmental modifications have created new ecological pressures that challenge traditional amphibian reproductive strategies. Your species' evolutionary history provides no guidance for dealing with permanent fish populations in previously fishless temporary pools. Adaptation must occur within individual lifetimes rather than across evolutionary timescales. Your most successful breeding sites remain those that maintain isolation from fish invasion through elevation, water chemistry, or physical barriers. The tadpoles developing in these protected pools grow rapidly under reduced predation pressure, their specialized feeding apparatus allowing efficient exploitation of algae and organic matter that other species cannot utilize. Within these refugia, your offspring demonstrate the adaptive advantages that have sustained your species through millions of years of environmental change. The metamorphosis phase brings new anxieties as your developing offspring attempt their first transitions from aquatic to terrestrial existence. Many fail during this vulnerable period, their newly developed limbs inadequate for surface navigation or their physiological systems unable to handle the stress of environmental transition. Others succumb to predation during their clumsy first attempts at terrestrial movement. Only the strongest and most adaptable successfully complete the transformation that will enable underground colonization. You witness some of your offspring's first surface movements with complex emotions that your solitary lifestyle rarely experiences. Pride at their successful development combines with concern for their survival prospects and frustration at your inability to provide guidance or protection. Your species' reproductive strategy demands complete independence from the moment of fertilization, but observing struggling young frogs triggers responses that feel almost parental despite the absence of caregiving behaviors. The breeding season's conclusion approaches as water levels drop and environmental conditions shift toward the dry period that will eliminate temporary pools. Your extended surface stay has achieved exceptional reproductive success, but the accumulated stress of territorial defense, multiple matings, and constant predator vigilance has taken its toll. Your body craves the stability and predictability of underground existence, the familiar rhythms of solitary hunting and tunnel maintenance. The descent back underground feels like returning home after an exhausting but necessary journey. Your tunnel system requires extensive renovation after months of abandonment, but the basic infrastructure remains sound. Other creatures have colonized vacant sections, requiring careful eviction procedures that balance territorial reclamation with energy conservation. Some passages need complete reconstruction due to seasonal ground shifts and route encroachment. Your hunting skills have evolved through 3 years of surface breeding experiences. The diverse prey capture techniques developed during extended above-ground stays translate into enhanced underground predation capabilities. Flying insects, surface arthropods, and aquatic invertebrates have all contributed to your skill set, creating hunting versatility that exceeds purely subterranean experience. Your strike accuracy reaches near perfection levels that minimize energy waste while maximizing capture success. The underground ecosystem welcomes your return with abundant hunting opportunities. Earthworm populations have exploded during your absence, creating rich feeding grounds throughout your territorial boundaries. Beetle larvae have established new colonies in previously marginal areas, expanding your potential prey base significantly. The 3-year cycle of surface absence and underground presence has allowed natural population fluctuations that benefit returning predators. Your territorial expansion proceeds systematically as you reclaim abandoned sections and explore new areas for colonization potential. The tunnel network grows more extensive with each underground period, connecting diverse hunting grounds and providing multiple escape routes for emergency situations. Your engineering skills have improved through experience, creating more efficient passage designs that minimize excavation energy while maximizing structural stability. Competition with other underground predators has shifted as you've grown larger and more experienced. Smaller competitors now avoid your territories entirely, recognizing chemical markers that indicate a dangerous occupancy. Larger predators still pose threats, but your enhanced size and refined combat skills make confrontations more evenly matched. The underground social hierarchy reflects these changing power dynamics through territorial negotiations and scent marker communications. Your 4th year of underground existence begins with the confidence of a mature predator operating at peak efficiency. You've mastered every aspect of subterranean survival, from optimal tunnel design to sophisticated prey capture techniques. The mysterious buried world that once challenged your every movement has become a predictable environment where you function as an apex predator with few equals and no superiors. But mastery brings unexpected restlessness. The same underground realm that once provided constant stimulation and challenge now feels routine, almost boring in its predictability. You know every soil layer, every seasonal change, every prey behavior pattern within your extensive territory. The environment that shaped your development and tested your survival capabilities has become too familiar, too safe, too limited for your expanded capabilities. The calling begins earlier this year, stirring in your consciousness months before the actual breeding season. Your body recognizes its own peak condition, the optimal combination of size, experience, and reproductive potential that maximizes genetic contribution opportunities. The underground predator you've become carries surface memories that grow more compelling as physical preparation for transformation accelerates. Hormonal changes begin subtly, preparing your physiology for another transition between worlds. Your tunnel system represents 4 years of careful excavation and territorial expansion. The network spans multiple acres of forest floor, connecting diverse hunting grounds through passages designed for maximum efficiency and safety. And some tunnels extend dozens of feet below the surface, reaching soil layers deposited centuries ago. Others remain close to the surface, exploiting the rich organic zones where most prey species concentrate their activities. The knowledge that you've successfully reproduced in previous seasons adds urgency to your continued underground existence. Your genetic material disperses through the anonymous population of developing frogs, contributing to species continuity without creating identifiable family connections. Some of your offspring have undoubtedly survived the brutal selection pressures of development and established their own underground territories. Others continue their own cycles of surface breeding and subterranean survival. But individual success means little compared to species level challenges emerging in the changing environment above your tunnels. Climate patterns shift in ways that affect rainfall timing and intensity, altering the temporary pool formation that enables successful reproduction. Human development fragments forest habitats, reducing the total area available for underground territories and surface breeding sites. Pollution infiltrates soil and water systems, creating chemical challenges that your species' evolutionary history never anticipated. Your personal survival skills cannot address these larger environmental threats, but your continued reproductive success contributes to population-level resilience that might enable species adaptation to changing conditions. Each successful breeding season adds genetic diversity to the population, increasing the probability that some individuals will possess trait combinations necessary for survival under novel environmental pressures. Your role extends beyond individual survival to encompass species-level evolutionary strategy. The underground world continues its ancient rhythms while surface conditions undergo rapid transformation. Deep soil layers remain stable despite surface chaos, providing refugia that could sustain remnant populations through periods of environmental crisis. Your species' dual existence strategy, underground stability combined with surface reproduction, offers advantages over purely terrestrial or aquatic amphibians that lack buried retreat options during difficult periods. Your territorial knowledge encompasses both an underground geography and surface topography, creating comprehensive understanding of habitat connectivity and resource distribution. This dual-world expertise positions you as a maximum contributor to reproductive success during favorable breeding seasons while maintaining survival capabilities that transcend surface environmental fluctuations. Your existence bridges ecological realms in ways that few species achieve. The approaching breeding season will be your fourth, representing the peak of your reproductive potential and territorial dominance. Your voice has reached maximum power and resonance. Your body has achieved optimal size and condition. Your experience provides strategic advantages over younger competitors. This season's reproductive success could represent your greatest genetic contribution to species continuity and population resilience. But success also carries risks that increase with each surface emergence. Predation pressure accumulates over multiple breeding seasons as aerial hunters learn to recognize profitable hunting locations. Environmental stress compounds with age, making recovery from surface exposure more difficult than during your younger years. The balance between reproductive opportunity and survival risk shifts gradually, but inexorably toward higher stakes decision-making. Your life as an Indian purple frog approaches its zenith: maximum territorial control, peak reproductive potential, optimal survival skills, comprehensive environmental knowledge. The underground predator and surface breeder exist in perfect balance, each phase of your dual existence refined through years of experience and adaptation. The extraordinary amphibian life cycle that defines your species reaches its full expression through your individual success and continued survival. The calling grows stronger each day, drawing you toward the surface world where your genetic legacy awaits its greatest opportunity for expansion and continuation. The fourth breeding season arrives with unprecedented intensity. Your emergence breaks through soil that feels familiar beneath your powerful limbs, but the forest above has transformed once again. Drought conditions from the previous year have altered the landscape dramatically. Streams have carved new channels, old breeding pools have shifted locations, and the entire topography bears scars from environmental stress that penetrated even your deep underground refuges. You surface into a world of scarcity. The temporary pools that should be forming from early monsoon rains remain absent, the soil around you cracked and hardened despite recent moisture. Climate patterns have shifted beyond the normal variations your species has weathered for millions of years. The reliable seasonal cycles that once governed breeding opportunities now fluctuate unpredictably, creating challenges your genetic programming never anticipated. Competition for the few viable breeding sites becomes savage. Males arrive from territories spanning miles of forest, drawn to the scarce water sources by desperation rather than choice. Your established territorial advantages mean little when everyone fights for access to pools barely large enough to support a fraction of the gathered amphibians. The social hierarchies that typically organize breeding aggregations collapse under resource pressure that transforms cooperation into survival warfare. Your voice struggles against dozens of others in acoustic chaos that drowns individual calls. The careful territorial boundaries that once organized breeding activities dissolve into overlapping claims and constant disputes. Physical confrontations replace vocal intimidation as the primary means of establishing access rights. Your size and experience provide advantages, but even dominant males face challenges that push survival skills beyond their normal limits. The few females that arrive carry egg loads reduced by environmental stress. Their bodies have absorbed developing eggs to maintain survival energy, leaving smaller reproductive investments than previous seasons offered. Competition for these limited mating opportunities intensifies beyond anything your previous breeding experience prepared you for. Every encounter becomes crucial when reproductive potential drops to fractions of normal levels. You secure mating opportunities through aggressive territorial defense that requires constant vigilance and energy expenditure. The females you successfully court carry precious genetic material, but their reduced egg production means fewer offspring to continue your lineage. Each fertilized egg represents concentrated reproductive investment that cannot be wasted through poor timing or inadequate territorial protection. The breeding pools that do form support ecological communities stressed beyond sustainable limits. Overcrowding creates conditions where disease spreads rapidly through concentrated amphibian populations. Water chemistry becomes toxic as waste products accumulate faster than natural processing can handle. Tadpole mortality rates exceed normal levels even before predation and competition eliminate additional populations. Your offspring develop under conditions that test adaptability to its absolute limits. The specialized feeding apparatus that typically provides competitive advantages becomes less effective when food sources diminish and water chemistry deteriorates. Many tadpoles fail to reach metamorphosis size before their pools evaporate completely. Others complete development, but emerge too weak to survive the transition to terrestrial existence. Environmental stress affects your own surface survival in ways you've never experienced. The extended drought has reduced insect populations that typically sustain breeding adults during their surface stays. Hunting opportunities become scarce as prey species retreat to deeper refuges or simply die off under harsh conditions. Your energy reserves drain faster than previous seasons allowed, forcing difficult decisions about territorial defense versus survival conservation. Predation pressure intensifies as reduced prey availability concentrates hunting activities around the few remaining water sources. Birds that normally distribute their feeding across multiple pools now focus on single locations where amphibian densities provide easy targets. Snakes and other terrestrial predators exploit the predictable congregation patterns, knowing exactly where desperate frogs must gather, regardless of danger levels. You witness ecological collapse on scales that dwarf individual survival concerns. Entire species disappear from breeding aggregations that once included dozens of amphibian varieties. The aquatic invertebrates that form the base of pool food webs vanish under chemical stress and overcrowding. Fish die-offs contaminate remaining water sources, creating toxic conditions that eliminate rather than support amphibian reproduction. The breeding season ends abruptly when the last viable pools evaporate weeks ahead of normal schedules. Your reproductive success falls far below previous year's achievements, but survival itself represents victory under conditions that eliminate most competitors entirely. The genetic material you contributed to the next generation carries forward under environmental pressures that will test every adaptive advantage your lineage possesses. The return journey underground offers relief from surface chaos, but the buried world also shows stress signs that penetrate deep soil layers. Root systems have died back as surface vegetation succumbs to drought conditions. The organic matter that feeds underground ecosystems has diminished, reducing prey populations throughout your territorial range. Even earthworms, typically abundant and reliable, have retreated to depths that challenge your excavation capabilities. Your tunnel system requires major modifications to reach moisture levels and prey concentrations adequate for survival. The passages that once provided easy access to hunting grounds now extend into barren soil where organic activity has ceased. You dig deeper than ever before, following water tables that have dropped beyond your previous experience. The familiar underground landscape has become as challenging as the surface world you escaped. Hunting efficiency drops dramatically as prey scarcity forces longer searches and higher energy expenditure for each successful capture. Beetle larvae have disappeared from areas where they once thrived. Ant colonies have relocated to deeper refuges beyond your normal hunting range. The underground ecosystem that sustained 4 years of steady growth now struggles to support basic survival needs. Competition intensifies even in the buried world as surface refugees join permanent underground residents in reduced habitat. Species that normally remain above ground now burrow deeper seeking moisture and food sources. Your territorial boundaries mean nothing when survival depends on exploiting every available resource, regardless of previous territorial agreements. The underground social order collapses just as surface hierarchies dissolved under environmental pressure. Your body begins showing stress signs that 4 years of successful survival never produced. Weight loss becomes noticeable as hunting success fails to meet metabolic requirements. Injuries heal more slowly when nutritional resources cannot support optimal recovery processes. The physical condition that once guaranteed territorial dominance deteriorates under sustained environmental pressure that challenges every aspect of your survival strategy. But adaptation continues even under impossible conditions. Your hunting techniques evolve to exploit marginal prey sources that other predators ignore or cannot access. Your tunnel system expands into virgin territory where competition remains minimal despite reduced resource availability. Your energy management becomes more sophisticated, conserving effort for essential activities while eliminating non-critical behaviors. The knowledge that environmental conditions exceed normal variation becomes undeniable as seasonal patterns fail to return to familiar ranges. This is not temporary drought or unusual weather. This represents fundamental ecological shift that demands evolutionary responses within individual lifetimes. Your species' dual existence strategy provides advantages, but even underground refuges cannot indefinitely sustain populations when surface reproduction becomes impossible. Your survival represents more than individual achievement under these conditions. Every successful underground predator maintains genetic potential for future reproductive opportunities when environmental conditions eventually stabilize. Your continued existence preserves evolutionary options that mass mortality events would otherwise eliminate. Species survival depends on individuals like you weathering impossible conditions until better times return. The underground world becomes your permanent refuge as surface conditions deteriorate beyond survival thresholds. The annual calling that once drew you to breeding pools grows weaker each year as environmental cues fail to trigger normal reproductive cycles. Your body recognizes the futility of surface emergence when drought eliminates breeding opportunities entirely. The dual existence that defined your species collapses into purely subterranean survival strategy. Deep soil layers provide stability that surface environments can no longer offer. Temperatures remain constant despite extreme fluctuations above ground. Moisture levels stay adequate even when surface water disappears completely. The ancient geological formations that support your tunnel system continue their slow processes regardless of rapid ecological changes occurring in the biological world above. Your territorial expansion focuses on accessing resources that remain stable during environmental crisis. Deep aquifers provide water that surface drought cannot eliminate. Ancient organic deposits offer food sources independent of current biological productivity. Mineral-rich soil layers support bacterial communities that maintain base ecosystem functions when surface food webs collapse entirely. The tunnel network you've constructed over 5 years becomes more than personal territory. It represents refugia that could sustain remnant populations through extended environmental crisis. Other surviving frogs discover your passages and request territorial access through chemical negotiations that balance individual survival needs against species preservation requirements. Your underground kingdom becomes a conservation ark, maintaining genetic diversity until surface conditions permit population recovery. But isolation extracts psychological costs that pure survival calculations cannot measure. The social interactions that once defined breeding seasons disappear along with surface emergence opportunities. The acoustic environment that filled forests with amphibian choruses falls silent as species after species succumbs to environmental pressures. Your existence becomes purely individual, disconnected from the community experiences that evolved to sustain mental health through challenging periods. The calling still stirs occasionally, triggered by deep rainfall that temporarily raises hopes for surface breeding opportunities. Your body prepares for emergence that cannot occur when pools form briefly, then evaporate before tadpole development can complete. The genetic programming that sustained your species through millions of years now creates frustration and energy waste when environmental conditions make reproduction impossible. Underground predation becomes more challenging as prey populations adapt to increased pressure from surface refugees. Earthworms develop deeper burrow strategies that require more energy to exploit. Beetle larvae concentrate in protected areas where multiple predators compete for limited resources. The hunting techniques that once guaranteed success now yield marginal returns that barely sustain basic metabolic requirements. Your body shows aging signs accelerated by chronic environmental stress. Movement becomes less fluid as joint wear accumulates without adequate nutrition for proper maintenance. Healing processes slow as cellular repair mechanisms operate under resource constraints. The physical capabilities that once dominated territorial competitions decline gradually but noticeably with each passing month. Yet survival continues through adaptations that push biological limits beyond their normal ranges. Your metabolic rate slows to conserve energy during periods of food scarcity. Your activity patterns shift to exploit prey availability cycles with maximum efficiency. Your body composition changes to store resources more effectively during brief abundance periods. Evolution operates within your individual lifetime, creating adaptive responses to environmental pressures that exceed species level experience. The underground world transforms into a different ecosystem as surface inputs diminish and internal cycling becomes more important. Decomposition processes slow without fresh organic matter from above. Nutrient cycling concentrates around bacterial communities that process existing organic deposits. The soil chemistry changes in ways that affect everything from tunnel stability to prey behavior patterns. Your territory becomes a laboratory for survival innovation, as traditional strategies prove inadequate for unprecedented conditions. New hunting techniques exploit resources that normal environmental conditions would never make profitable. Modified tunnel designs access water sources too deep for previous excavation efforts. Behavioral adaptations reduce energy expenditure while maintaining essential survival functions. The isolation deepens as other species disappear from your underground territory. The complex ecosystem that once supported diverse predator and prey communities simplifies into basic survival relationships. Your existence becomes increasingly solitary as competition eliminates weaker individuals and environmental pressure reduces overall population densities to levels that minimize social interactions. But genetic memory preserves knowledge of better times, maintaining hope that environmental conditions will eventually stabilize enough to permit species recovery. Your survival represents evolutionary investment in future opportunities that current conditions cannot support. The underground refugia you've created could serve as foundation for population rebuilding when surface habitats become viable again. Your life as an Indian purple frog continues against odds that would have seemed impossible during your early years of underground exploration and surface breeding. The extraordinary amphibian existence that once moved confidently between two worlds now concentrates on pure survival in the buried realm that offers the only remaining sanctuary from environmental collapse above. The years blur together in the darkness. Your once powerful body has become a shadow of its former self, worn down by relentless environmental pressure and the simple passage of time. The tunnels that once felt like a kingdom now seem more like a tomb, their familiar passages echoing with emptiness, where other creatures once thrived. You move more slowly now, each step deliberate and calculated to conserve energy that becomes harder to replenish with each passing day. Your hunting has become an exercise in desperation rather than skill. The prey that sustained you for years has dwindled to almost nothing. Earthworms retreat so deep that reaching them requires excavation efforts that burn more energy than the meal provides. Beetle larvae have vanished entirely from areas where they once flourished. Even the hardy ant colonies that survived the initial environmental collapse have relocated beyond your diminished hunting range. You've learned to survive on scraps that would have seemed beneath notice during your prime years. Tiny soil mites, barely worth the effort to capture, become precious sources of protein. Dead root fragments provide minimal nutrition but keep you alive when nothing else remains available. Your body has adapted to extract every possible nutrient from the most marginal food sources, but adaptation has limits that chronic starvation approaches relentlessly. The tunnel system you spent years perfecting now works against you in some ways. The extensive network requires energy to maintain that you can barely afford to spend. Collapsed sections remain unrepaired because excavation demands exceed your diminished capabilities. Some passages flood during rare heavy rains, creating muddy conditions that make movement exhausting rather than efficient. Your underground empire has become too large for its weakened emperor to control effectively. Water becomes an obsession as even deep aquifers show stress from the prolonged drought above. You dig deeper than ever before, following moisture traces through soil layers that feel increasingly alien. The familiar earth of your territory gives way to clay and rock formations that resist excavation but offer the only hope of reaching sustainable water sources. Your claws wear down against hard surfaces, making further digging progressively more difficult. Temperature fluctuations penetrate deeper into the soil as surface conditions grow more extreme. The stable underground climate that once provided refuge from surface chaos now varies enough to affect your cold-blooded physiology. Hot days send scorching temperatures down through normally cool soil layers. Cold snaps freeze moisture in shallow tunnels, creating ice barriers that block access to essential resources. Your body struggles to regulate core temperature when environmental baselines shift beyond normal ranges. Sleep becomes elusive as stress hormones flood your system in response to chronic survival pressure. The rest periods that once restored your energy now provide only fitful unconsciousness, interrupted by imaginary threats and phantom hunger pangs. Your nervous system operates in constant alert mode, searching for dangers and opportunities that rarely materialize in the barren underground landscape. Exhaustion accumulates without adequate recovery opportunities. Dreams, when they come, carry you back to better times. You remember the overwhelming sensory explosion of your first surface emergence, the terror and wonder of discovering light and air and open space. You recall the satisfaction of territorial dominance during peak breeding seasons, your voice carrying across forest pools filled with competing males and receptive females. The memories feel like stories from someone else's life, too vivid to be fantasy, but too distant to seem real. The calling still stirs occasionally, triggered by deep vibrations that might indicate rainfall far above your tunnels. Your body responds with pathetic remnants of reproductive preparation, hormonal surges that accomplish nothing, muscle tension that serves no purpose, vocal exercises that produce only whispered echoes of your former power. The genetic programming that once drove you to surface breeding now creates cruel mockery of instincts that environmental reality has made impossible to fulfill. Other survivors occasionally cross your territory, fellow refugees from the ecological collapse that claimed most amphibian populations. These encounters usually end in territorial disputes over resources too scarce to share, but sometimes you achieve temporary truces that allow information exchange about conditions in distant areas. The news is universally grim. Drought continues, surface waters remain absent, prey populations show no signs of recovery. Some refugees carry stories of surface expeditions that discovered permanent changes to the forest ecosystem. Trees have died in massive numbers, their root systems no longer providing the underground architecture that once supported diverse soil communities. Streams have shifted course or disappeared entirely, eliminating the watershed patterns that created reliable breeding pool locations. The landscape your species evolved to exploit has transformed into something fundamentally different. Chemical changes in the soil affect everything from tunnel stability to prey behavior. Pollution infiltration from surface sources creates toxic zones that kill beneficial bacteria and contaminate water supplies. Acidification from atmospheric deposition alters soil chemistry in ways that make earthworm survival impossible. Heavy metals concentrate in areas where they never existed before, poisoning food webs from the bottom up. The underground world itself becomes hostile to the life it once supported. Your body shows cumulative damage from years of environmental stress and inadequate nutrition. Muscle mass has decreased to levels that make normal movement laborious. Bone density has dropped enough to create fracture risks from minor impacts. Your immune system operates at reduced capacity, making you vulnerable to infections that healthy frogs would easily resist. Wound healing has slowed to the point where minor injuries become major health threats. Cognitive function declines as malnutrition affects brain chemistry and neural connections. Memory becomes unreliable, making navigation through familiar tunnel systems surprisingly difficult. Problem-solving abilities diminish, reducing your capacity to adapt hunting techniques to changing prey availability. The mental acuity that once distinguished you as a superior predator fades along with physical capabilities, creating a downward spiral of reduced effectiveness. The social isolation weighs more heavily as time passes without meaningful contact with your own species. Amphibians are not typically social creatures, but the complete absence of breeding opportunities eliminates the community interactions that once provided psychological relief from solitary underground existence. You exist in a silence, broken only by your own movements and the occasional sounds of soil settling or water dripping through distant passages. Territory maintenance becomes increasingly selective as you focus resources on the most essential areas while abandoning peripheral sections. The core tunnels that provide access to your best remaining hunting grounds receive careful attention, but outlying passages collapse or flood without intervention. Your underground domain shrinks gradually but steadily as maintenance demands exceed your diminished capabilities. Food caching strategies evolve to maximize storage efficiency when rare, successful hunts provide surplus resources. You learn to preserve organic matter in cool, dry locations where decomposition slows enough to extend usefulness. Emergency food supplies become critical survival tools when hunting failures stretch into dangerous duration. Every scrap of nutrition gets utilized to its maximum potential before desperation forces consumption of increasingly marginal materials. The boundaries between sleep and wakefulness blur as chronic fatigue makes normal activity cycles impossible to maintain. You rest when exhaustion becomes overwhelming, regardless of day or night cycles that have little meaning in the perpetual darkness of deep tunnels. Activity periods focus entirely on essential survival tasks, hunting, water location, tunnel maintenance, with no energy available for exploration or territorial expansion. Your movements become increasingly cautious as reduced physical capabilities make injury risks more serious. Falls that once would have caused minor bruises now threaten bone fractures that could prove fatal. Tunnel collapses that healthy frogs could escape through strength and agility become potential death traps for weakened bodies. Every action requires careful risk assessment because recovery options have disappeared along with environmental resources. The underground ecosystem continues its decline as surface inputs that once sustained soil communities remain absent. Organic matter decomposition slows to minimal levels without fresh material from dying vegetation above. Bacterial populations crash as their food sources disappear, eliminating the base of underground food webs. The complex biological communities that once made subterranean hunting profitable simplify into barren environments where life barely persists. Chemical communication becomes less reliable as your scent producing capabilities diminish along with overall health. The territorial markers that once clearly defined your domain grow weak and intermittent. Other creatures may not recognize your claims or respect boundaries that carry insufficient chemical authority. The underground social order that operated through scent based negotiations collapses when participants lack the physical resources to maintain proper communication protocols. Seasonal awareness fades as surface cues become too weak to penetrate your deep refuges. The temperature and moisture variations that once provided timing information for breeding cycles and hunting strategies now blur into meaningless fluctuations. Your circadian rhythms drift without external synchronization, making sleep and activity patterns increasingly random. The connection between underground existence and surface seasons dissolves into irrelevant background noise. Water quality deteriorates as underground sources concentrate pollutants and waste products without adequate dilution or natural filtration. The aquifers that provide your drinking water carry chemical loads that stress your kidneys and liver beyond their normal processing capacity. Mineral concentrations reach toxic levels in some sources, forcing difficult choices between dehydration and poisoning. Even the most basic survival requirement becomes a calculated risk. Your genetic legacy remains uncertain as the offspring you produced during previous breeding seasons face the same environmental pressures that challenge your own survival. Some may have found better refuges or developed superior adaptation strategies, but most likely succumbed to conditions that push biological limits beyond sustainable ranges. The reproductive success you achieved during favorable years may prove meaningless if no individuals survive to continue the lineage. The tunnel network you created over years of careful excavation becomes a monument to better times, its passages echoing with memories of abundant prey and reliable resources. The engineering accomplishments that once filled you with pride now seem like elaborate preparation for a future that environmental collapse has made impossible. Your life's work in soil and darkness stands as testimony to an ecosystem that no longer exists. Emergency protocols developed for short-term survival crises prove inadequate for permanent environmental degradation. The cached food supplies that could sustain you through brief hardships cannot support indefinite survival when conditions never improve. The alternative hunting grounds that provided backup resources during temporary prey shortages offer no solutions when primary ecosystems collapse entirely. Contingency planning reaches its limits when all options lead to the same inevitable conclusion. Your breathing becomes labored as even minimal exertion taxes cardiovascular systems stressed by chronic malnutrition and environmental toxins. The powerful lungs that once supported territorial calling and underwater mating activities now struggle to provide adequate oxygen for basic metabolic functions. Each breath requires conscious effort that healthy frogs never notice, making every moment a reminder of your body's declining capabilities. The darkness that once felt protective and familiar now seems oppressive, a black weight that presses down from all directions. Your eyes, adapted for complete darkness, can no longer distinguish subtle variations in tunnel architecture that once provided the navigation cues. The underground world has become a sensory void where even your specialized adaptations fail to provide adequate environmental information. You move through familiar territory like a stranger lost in alien landscape. Time measurement becomes impossible without external reference points or internal biological rhythms that environmental stress has disrupted. Days might pass without your awareness, or minutes might stretch into apparent hours when survival anxiety distorts perception. The chronological framework that once organized your existence into predictable cycles dissolves into an eternal present focused entirely on immediate survival needs. Your life as an Indian purple frog approaches its final chapter in conditions that would have seemed impossible during your early years of underground exploration and surface reproduction. The extraordinary amphibian existence that once moved confidently between buried hunting grounds and temporary breeding pools now concentrates on extracting the last possible moments from an environment that can no longer sustain the species it once supported. The ancient cycle that connected darkness to light, survival to reproduction, individual achievement to species continuity, faces its ultimate test in a world transformed beyond recognition. Your movements become increasingly erratic as your nervous system begins to fail under the accumulated stress of years without adequate nutrition. The precise motor control that once made you a deadly underground predator dissolves into trembling uncertainty. Your legs shake when you attempt to dig, making excavation nearly impossible even when you locate promising areas. The coordination between your limbs that enabled efficient tunnel navigation disappears, leaving you stumbling through passages you excavated with expert precision just months earlier. The few remaining prey items in your territory seem to sense your weakness, moving with confidence that would have been suicidal during your prime years. Earthworms no longer retreat when they detect your approach. Small insects ignore your presence entirely, crawling past your motionless form without concern. Even the tiniest soil mites demonstrate escape behaviors that your diminished reflexes cannot counter. The predator-prey relationships that once defined your existence have reversed completely. Your digestive system struggles to process what little food you manage to capture. The powerful stomach acids that once broke down tough beetle exoskeletons now irritate your internal organs when they encounter only minimal organic matter. Nutrient absorption becomes increasingly inefficient as your intestinal lining deteriorates from chronic emptiness. Your body begins consuming its own muscle tissue to maintain basic organ function, accelerating the physical decline that starvation initiated. Water intake drops to dangerous levels as the effort required to reach moisture sources exceeds the energy they provide. Dehydration affects every biological process, from cellular metabolism to waste elimination. Your skin loses its elasticity, becoming papery and fragile. Your blood thickens, making circulation sluggish and reducing oxygen delivery to vital organs. The underground streams that once sustained you now seem impossibly distant, separated by excavation challenges your weakened body cannot overcome. Temperature regulation becomes impossible as your reduced muscle mass can no longer generate adequate body heat. The stable underground temperatures that once felt comfortable now seem frigid against your depleted frame. You spend increasing amounts of time motionless, conserving whatever warmth your failing metabolism can produce. Movement becomes a luxury you can rarely afford, reserved only for the most essential survival activities. Your respiratory rate increases as damaged lungs struggle to extract sufficient oxygen from the thin air of deep tunnels. Each breath sounds labored and wet, suggesting fluid accumulation that healthy respiratory systems would easily clear. The carbon dioxide you exhale carries the sweet smell of ketosis, indicating that your body has begun breaking down its own fat reserves in a desperate attempt to maintain brain function. Your underground refuge has become a tomb where you slowly suffocate. Waste elimination becomes irregular and painful as your digestive tract essentially shuts down from lack of input. The toxins that healthy kidneys would filter accumulate in your bloodstream, affecting cognitive function and motor control. Your body's natural detoxification systems operate far below capacity, allowing harmful compounds to reach concentrations that would be lethal under normal circumstances. Poisoning occurs gradually, from within, as your own metabolism becomes toxic. Sleep and unconsciousness merge into extended periods of near catatonic stillness. Dreams become indistinguishable from waking hallucinations as your malnourished brain creates phantom sensations and false memories. You imagine successful hunts that never occurred, water sources that don't exist, surface emergences that lead to breeding pools filled with receptive mates. Reality and fantasy blend until you can no longer distinguish between actual experiences and desperate wishful thinking. The tunnel walls seem to close in around you as spatial perception becomes unreliable. Passages that once felt spacious now appear cramped and threatening. Distance estimates fail completely, making navigation through familiar territory a disorienting struggle. Your sense of direction deteriorates to the point where you sometimes become lost in tunnel systems you designed and excavated yourself. The underground world that once felt like home becomes an alien maze where every turn leads to confusion. Chemical communication abilities disappear entirely as your scent-producing glands cease function. The territorial markers that once defined your domain fade to undetectable levels, leaving your boundaries unmarked and undefended. Other creatures, if any remain, could enter your territory without triggering the chemical alarms that previously protected your resources. You exist in olfactory silence, cut off from the scent-based information networks that once connected you to the broader underground community. Your skin begins to show signs of systemic organ failure. Patches of discoloration appear where circulation has become inadequate to maintain healthy tissue. Small wounds refuse to heal, becoming infected despite the sterile underground environment. Your natural immunity has collapsed to the point where even minor bacterial infections pose life-threatening challenges. The purple coloration that once marked you as a healthy breeding adult fades to sickly gray tones that reflect your internal deterioration. Memory function degrades rapidly as malnutrition affects neural pathways that store and retrieve information. You forget the locations of food caches you established just days earlier. Navigation routes through your tunnel system become impossible to remember, forcing you to rediscover familiar paths through trial and error. The hunting techniques that once seemed instinctive now require conscious effort to recall, and even then, execution proves beyond your diminished capabilities. Muscle control deteriorates to the point where coordinated movement becomes impossible. Your legs can no longer support your body weight reliably, causing frequent falls that injure joints and bones already weakened by calcium deficiency. Digging motions that once moved soil efficiently now accomplish nothing more than pathetic scraping that wastes precious energy. Your body has become a prison that traps your consciousness in failing flesh. The calling that once drew you to surface breeding opportunities becomes a cruel mockery as your vocal apparatus atrophies from disuse and malnutrition. Attempts to produce sound result in barely audible whispers that carry no distance through the tunnel system. The powerful bass notes that once claimed territory and attracted mates have diminished to silent mouth movements that accomplish nothing. Your voice dies before your body does. Coordination between your senses fails as neural connections deteriorate under sustained stress. Visual processing becomes confused, creating phantom movements in your peripheral vision that trigger useless escape responses. Your sense of touch provides false information about soil texture and tunnel conditions. Even your specialized ability to detect vibrations through solid matter becomes unreliable, leaving you deaf to the underground world's subtle communications. Blood circulation slows to barely functional levels as your heart muscle weakens from chronic nutritional deficiency. Extremities so become cold and numb, eventually losing sensation entirely. Your core body temperature drops below the threshold required for normal metabolic function, forcing your remaining organs to operate in emergency mode. Cellular processes that once maintained your health now consume more energy than they produce. The underground ecosystem around you shows similar signs of collapse. Bacterial communities that once processed organic matter have died off, leaving undecomposed materials to accumulate in toxic concentrations. The soil chemistry has shifted beyond the tolerance ranges of most underground life forms. Your tunnel system has become an underground desert where biological activity has essentially ceased. You exist as one of the last surviving remnants of an ecosystem that no longer functions. Consciousness becomes intermittent as your brain receives inadequate glucose and oxygen to maintain normal activity levels. Periods of awareness alternate with stretches of unconsciousness that might last hours or days. During lucid moments, you experience clarity about your situation that feels almost surreal. You understand exactly what's happening to your body, but lack any ability to change the trajectory toward inevitable death. The knowledge brings no fear, only tired acceptance. Your position in the tunnel system becomes fixed as movement requires energy expenditure beyond your capabilities. The location where weakness finally overcomes mobility becomes your final resting place by default, rather than choice. It's a narrow passage deep in your territory, far from the surface world you once visited with such trepidation and excitement. The darkness that always surrounded you now seems to emanate from within your own failing body. Breathing becomes increasingly shallow and irregular as your respiratory muscles lose strength. Each breath might be your last, though you lack the awareness to recognize the significance of this biological countdown. Carbon dioxide accumulates in your bloodstream as gas exchange efficiency drops below sustainable levels. Your body begins the final shutdown sequence that will end consciousness permanently. The tunnel walls blur and fade as your vision fails completely. The underground world that shaped your entire existence disappears into blackness deeper than the physical darkness you've always known. Your other senses follow in rapid succession. Hearing fades to silence. Touch becomes numb insensitivity. Chemical detection ceases entirely. You exist in a sensory void that grows smaller with each failing heartbeat. Your final moments arrive without drama or struggle. Your heart stops beating not from trauma or violence, but from simple exhaustion after years of operating without adequate support. Brain activity ceases as oxygen delivery drops below critical thresholds. The extraordinary consciousness that navigated between underground hunting and surface breeding, that mastered tunnel excavation and territorial defense, that contributed genetic material to future generations, simply ends. No pain, no panic, no awareness of transition, just the quiet conclusion of a life that pushed biological limits far beyond their normal ranges. Your body remains where it falls, in the tunnel system you spent years creating and defending. The passages that once echoed with your movements now hold only stillness. The hunting grounds that provided sustenance through seasons of abundance and scarcity contain no prey worth pursuing. The territorial boundaries you marked and defended have become meaningless in an ecosystem that no longer supports the species they were meant to protect. But your story doesn't end with individual death. The genetic material you contributed during successful breeding seasons continues in whatever offspring managed to survive the environmental collapse that claimed your life. Some may have found better refuges, developed superior adaptations, or simply possess the specific trait combinations necessary for survival under impossible conditions. Your reproductive success during favorable years represents investment in evolutionary futures you'll never witness. The tunnel system you created will outlast your physical presence, providing potential refugia for any amphibians that survive long enough to discover them. The passages you excavated through years of patient labor could shelter remnant populations through continued environmental crisis. Your life's work in soil and darkness becomes part of the geological record, evidence that complex life once thrived in underground realms that environmental change has rendered temporarily uninhabitable. Your death marks another step in the ecological transformation that has eliminated most amphibian species from landscapes they inhabited for millions of years. Climate change, habitat destruction, pollution, and countless other human impacts have created environmental conditions that exceed the adaptive capabilities of creatures whose evolutionary strategies worked perfectly until recent decades. Your species' dual existence between underground stability and surface reproduction offered advantages that proved insufficient when both realms became hostile to life. The forest above your tunnels continues its own struggle against environmental pressures that threaten ecosystems worldwide. Trees die and fall without producing the organic matter that once fed underground communities. Streams disappear or become too polluted to support aquatic reproduction. The seasonal patterns that governed breeding cycles for millions of years shift beyond the tolerance ranges of species that cannot adapt quickly enough to survive rapid change. Yet life persists in forms that environmental crisis cannot eliminate entirely. Deep soil bacteria continue their ancient processes of nutrient cycling and organic matter decomposition. Groundwater systems maintain some connectivity between distant refugia where surviving populations might eventually reconnect. The geological processes that create underground habitats operate on timescales that transcend individual species extinction, potentially providing foundations for future evolutionary radiations when conditions stabilize. Your individual existence, from underground hatching through surface breeding to final starvation, represents a complete expression of your species' extraordinary life cycle under conditions that tested every adaptive advantage to its absolute limits. The dual-world existence that once moved confidently between buried hunting grounds and temporary breeding pools maintained itself until environmental change made continuation impossible. Your life demonstrated both the remarkable resilience and ultimate vulnerability of evolutionary strategies, refined through millions of years of environmental stability. The extraordinary amphibian existence you lived, mastering tunnel excavation and soil hunting, navigating surface chaos and breeding competition, surviving predation and environmental stress, continues in the memories encoded in whatever genetic material your reproduction contributed to future generations. Your individual story ends in the darkness where it began, but the larger narrative of your species' relationship with underground and surface worlds remains unfinished, awaiting environmental conditions that might once again permit the remarkable life cycle you completed against impossible odds. The calling that once drew you to the surface world has finally quieted, not through satisfaction, but through the simple cessation of the biological processes that generated it. Your extraordinary journey between darkness and light, survival and reproduction, individual achievement and species continuity, concludes in the buried realm that provided your only sanctuary when the surface world became uninhabitable. Your life as an Indian purple frog ends where it began, in soil and darkness, surrounded by the tunnels that represented both your greatest achievement and your final refuge from a world transformed beyond recognition. The silence in your tunnels becomes absolute. Your body lies motionless in the passage, where exhaustion finally claimed you, but the story doesn't end there. Within hours, the underground ecosystem begins its ancient works of reclamation. Bacteria that survived the environmental collapse start breaking down your tissues, returning nutrients to soil that has been starved of organic matter for years. Your death creates a small oasis of fertility in the barren underground landscape. The proteins and minerals locked in your body slowly leach into the surrounding earth, creating conditions that haven't existed since the ecological collapse began. Microscopic organisms that barely survived in dormant states suddenly find enough resources to resume active reproduction. Your final contribution to the underground world feeds the very foundation of soil life. Other survivors detect the chemical signals of decomposition from considerable distances. A few remaining earthworms migrate toward your location, drawn by the promise of enriched soil conditions. Beetle larvae that retreated to the deepest refuges begin their slow journey toward this unexpected source of nutrition. Your death becomes a beacon of hope in an ecosystem that had forgotten abundance. The tunnel system you created serves its final purpose as other amphibians discover the passages you spent years perfecting. A young purple frog, barely surviving in marginal territory, finds your network and claims sections that offer better protection than anything it could excavate alone. Your engineering expertise lives on through creatures you never met, providing survival advantages that your own death made available. Seasonal rains eventually return, though different in pattern and intensity than the cycles your species evolved to exploit. Water seeps through your tunnel system, carrying dissolved nutrients from your decomposed body deeper into the soil profile. The organic compounds that once powered your hunting and reproduction now fuel bacterial communities that begin rebuilding the underground ecosystem from its collapsed foundations. Years pass before surface conditions stabilize enough to support amphibian reproduction again. When temporary pools finally form with adequate duration and water quality, they're fed by groundwater that carries traces of nutrients from your decomposed body. The tadpoles that develop in these pools benefit from chemical contributions you made through your death, though they'll never know the source of their enriched environment. Your genetic legacy manifests in unexpected ways as environmental pressures continue selecting for specific adaptive traits. Some of your offspring inherited enhanced drought tolerance that proves crucial for survival during extended dry periods. Others possess improved tunnel excavation abilities that allow access to deeper water sources. The reproductive success you achieved during favorable breeding seasons planted genetic seeds that germinate under conditions you never experienced. The forest above your tunnels begins its slow recovery as climate patterns gradually stabilize within ranges that permit ecosystem restoration. Dead trees decompose, enriching soil layers that will support new vegetation growth. Stream channels carved during extreme weather events create different watershed patterns that could generate novel breeding habitats. The landscape transforms into something neither familiar nor completely alien. New amphibian communities emerge from refugia scattered across the region, carrying genetic material that survived the population bottleneck your generation endured. Some individuals bear genetic markers that trace back to your successful breeding seasons, though the connections remain invisible to conscious observation. Your contribution to species recovery operates through mechanisms that transcend individual recognition or memory. The tunnel network you excavated becomes part of the underground infrastructure that supports ecosystem recovery. Water flow patterns follow routes you created, distributing moisture and nutrients with efficiency that random natural processes couldn't achieve. Wildlife species that never existed during your lifetime discover passages that provide shelter and hunting opportunities in the slowly recovering landscape. Underground bacterial communities rebuild their complex relationships using organic matter from your decomposed body as foundational resources. The soil chemistry gradually shifts back toward conditions that can support diverse life forms. Nutrient cycling processes resume their ancient patterns, though modified by the environmental trauma that eliminated most biological activity for years. Your death feeds the resurrection of an ecosystem that seemed permanently lost. Decades after your final breath, purple frogs once again emerge from underground territories to breed in temporary pools formed by returning monsoons. Their calls echo through forests that have regrown from seeds that survived in soil enriched by your decomposition. The breeding aggregations that form include individuals whose genetic heritage traces back through multiple generations to the reproductive success you achieved during your brief surface emergences. The extraordinary life cycle that defined your existence, the patient underground hunting, the dangerous surface emergences, the competitive breeding displays, the careful territorial management, resumes its ancient rhythm in landscapes that bear no resemblance to the world you knew. New environmental pressures test adaptations in ways your generation never experienced, but the fundamental strategy of dual existence between buried and surface worlds proves resilient enough to persist through ecological transformation. Your individual story becomes one thread in the larger narrative of species survival through environmental crisis. The tunnel you died in eventually collapses, but its location remains marked by slightly different soil chemistry that supports unique bacterial communities. Scientists studying ecosystem recovery decades later might detect these chemical signatures without understanding their connection to a single frog's final struggle against impossible odds. The calling that once drew you to surface breeding pools now summons new generations of purple frogs who inherit genetic material you contributed to the species' survival. Their voices carry frequencies and patterns shaped by evolutionary pressures you helped your lineage survive. The songs that echo through recovering forests contain echoes of the territorial calls you made during your brief moments in the light. Climate patterns continue evolving in ways that create new challenges and opportunities for amphibian communities. The environmental stability your species evolved to exploit may never return, but the genetic diversity preserved through reproduction during favorable periods provides raw material for adaptation to novel conditions. Your breeding success planted evolutionary options that future generations will explore through survival strategies you never imagined. The underground world you mastered undergoes its own transformation as surface recovery alters the flow of organic matter and chemical inputs that sustain soil ecosystems. New relationships emerge between surface and subsurface communities, creating ecological connections that didn't exist during your lifetime. The tunnel systems that provide amphibian refugia become integrated into food webs that support recovery at multiple levels. Your extraordinary amphibian existence, spanning underground predation, surface reproduction, environmental crisis, and final starvation, represents a complete expression of biological resilience tested to its absolute limits. The life cycle you completed under impossible conditions preserved genetic and ecological information that enables species recovery when environmental conditions permit continuation of evolutionary strategies millions of years in development. The darkness where your life began and ended maintains its ancient stability, while the surface world above continues transforming through climate patterns that will define new ecological relationships. Underground refugia, like the tunnel system you created, provide foundational infrastructure for ecosystem recovery that depends on both surface restoration and subsurface stability. Your individual achievement in mastering dual world existence contributes to species level survival strategies that transcend the environmental crisis that claimed your life. The purple frog that emerges from underground territories in future breeding seasons will carry forward the extraordinary amphibian legacy you helped preserve through your reproduction and final sacrifice. Their lives will unfold according to the same basic patterns that defined your existence: patient underground hunting, punctuated by brief but crucial surface emergences for reproductive purposes. The cycle continues, enriched by genetic contributions you made and environmental knowledge your survival strategy preserved, in landscapes that honor your species' remarkable adaptation to life between two worlds through their very existence. Your complete life as an Indian purple frog, from hatching in buried darkness through underground mastery and surface breeding to final starvation in the tunnels you created, ends where countless others will begin, in soil enriched by your sacrifice and warmed by the knowledge that extraordinary amphibian existence persists through individual stories that collectively ensure species survival against impossible odds. Here you can find the next video. Click on it. Until then, see you soon.